I walked into my daughter's house on Christmas Eve, wearing a coat I'd bought at Goodwill 3 weeks earlier. The sleeves were too short, the lining torn at one shoulder. I'd rubbed dirt into the cuffs that morning just to sell it. Margaret had watched me from the bedroom doorway, her face carefully neutral, and when I caught her eye, she'd given me the smallest nod. We both knew what tonight was about. The driveway was packed with expensive cars, a Tesla, 2 BMWs, a Range Rover that probably cost more than most people made in a year. I parked my 15-year-old Honda at the curb, making sure it was visible from the front windows. Part of the performance. Every detail mattered. Allison opened the door with her practiced smile, the one she used for charity galas and parent-teacher conferences. "Dad! You made it!" She leaned in for a hug that lasted exactly 2 seconds, her hands barely touching my back. I could smell her perfume, something expensive and cloying. Over her shoulder, I could see Garrett in the kitchen, pouring wine into glasses that probably cost more than my fake coat. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, shuffling inside like my knees hurt. They didn't. I run 5 miles every morning and can still deadlift 220, but Allie didn't need to know that. I'd spent weeks perfecting this shuffle, this slight hunch to my shoulders that suggested age and weakness. The house smelled like catered food trying to pass as homemade. I recognized the scent, Italian, probably from that place downtown that charges $40 for pasta. The Christmas tree in the corner was professionally decorated, every ornament perfectly placed, every light strand precisely wound. Nothing warm about it. Nothing real. Garrett appeared with a glass of red wine, his smile as smooth as his cashmere sweater. "Rick, good to see you. Here, this'll warm you up. It's cold out there." He pressed the glass into my hand with the kind of gentle firmness you'd use with a child or an invalid. I took the glass with a hand. I made sure to tremble slightly. "Appreciate it. Heat's been acting up in the apartment." "Still having trouble with that?" Garrett's concern was perfectly pitched, like he'd rehearsed it. Probably had. "You know, there are programs for seniors, fixed income assistance. I could get you some information." "That's kind of you." I sipped the wine. It was excellent, probably $200 a bottle. I made a mental note. Everything they spent, every luxury they displayed, was another piece of evidence. Another proof that the life they were living was built on sand. Margaret arrived a few minutes later, her entrance far more subdued than mine. She wore a simple dress, nothing fancy, and carried a store-bought pie. She kissed Allie's cheek, squeezed Garrett's hand, and settled onto the couch beside me with the ease of someone who'd been playing this game for 40 years. Our hands found each other in the space between us, hidden by the couch arm. Her fingers squeezed mine once, twice. Our signal. Everything's going according to plan. The other guests arrived in waves. Garrett's business partner, a sleek man named Vincent who talked too loud about cryptocurrency. Allie's friend from the hospital board, a woman whose smile never reached her eyes. A couple who owned a gallery downtown, their conversation full of names and prices. Everyone in this room was performing, selling a version of themselves they thought would impress the others. Dinner was a performance. Allie talked about her work with the Children's Hospital Board, her voice rich with carefully modulated compassion. She described a recent fundraiser, the touching moment when a sick child thanked the donors, the way the community came together. She made it sound like she'd personally saved lives. What she didn't mention was that her actual contribution to the board was minimal, that she'd joined for the social cachet, not the cause. Garrett discussed a new investment opportunity, something about sustainable housing, his words sliding past each other like well-oiled machinery. He threw around terms like disruption and scalability and vertical integration. It was impressive if you didn't know anything about business. I knew plenty. Every sentence he spoke was smoke, designed to obscure rather than illuminate. I ate quietly, asked simple questions, played the aging father who didn't quite follow the complexities of modern business. I let confusion cloud my face when Garrett explained his latest venture. I nodded along when Vincent launched into a monologue about blockchain technology. I was the perfect audience, present but not threatening, interested but not informed. And I watched. Garrett's tablet sat on the counter, screen dark but not off. Twice during dinner his phone buzzed and he glanced at it with an expression that flickered between annoyance and worry before he smoothed it away. The third time, Allie caught the look and her own face tightened for just a moment. Her hand went to her wine glass and I saw her knuckles whiten around the stem. "Everything okay?" I asked, letting a note of elderly confusion creep into my voice. "Fine, Dad." Allie's smile snapped back into place like a rubber band. "Just some year-end business stuff. You know how it is." I didn't push. Instead, I mentioned my pension, how I was grateful it covered rent and basics, how I was managing to get by with a little careful budgeting. Allie's eye twitched. Just once. But I saw it. Garrett's hand paused halfway to his mouth, fork suspended. They were listening now. Really listening. "It's not much," I continued, my voice carrying that quaver I'd practiced. "But it's enough, and I've got a little saved. Not a lot, but enough for emergencies." "That's smart, Rick," Garrett said. His voice was warm, but his eyes were calculating. "You know, if you ever want to talk about making that money work harder for you, I'd be happy to look at your portfolio." "Oh, I don't have a portfolio, just a savings account. And the pension." I could see them doing the math, estimating what a pension might pay, what a little saved might mean. They were sizing up the prey, calculating their advantage. After dessert, Garrett excused himself to take a call. He walked into his study but didn't close the door all the way. I could hear fragments as I stood near the hallway, pretending to admire a piece of art on the wall. "After the holidays. Can't move it now. I told you the asset situation is temporary. Yes, I'm working on a solution." I filed it away. Every word was a clue, another piece of the puzzle I was assembling. When I returned to the living room, I found Allie showing Margaret photos on her phone, vacation pictures from somewhere tropical, crystal clear water and white sand beaches. "We went in November," Allie was saying. "Garrett had some business meetings down there, so we made it a little getaway." Margaret made appropriate noises, but I knew what she was thinking. Business meetings, another expense charged to a failing company, another luxury they couldn't afford but couldn't resist. We left at 10. Margaret drove, her hands steady on the wheel. We didn't speak until we were 5 miles away, safely out of range of any possibility they might see us, might follow us, might discover that the modest apartment we pretended to live in was just an address we kept for mail. "Well?" she asked. "They're bleeding," I said. "And they think I'm the transfusion." She nodded. "The phone call?" "Garrett's scrambling. Someone's pressing him for payment. He mentioned after the holidays an asset situation. They're buying time." "How long do you think they have?" "Not long. Weeks, maybe. A couple months at most." I watched the dark streets roll past. "Which means they'll move on me soon. They'll push for access to my accounts, try to get me to invest in something or loan them money directly. And when they do, then we'll have them." Margaret pulled into the parking garage of our real building, the luxury condo tower downtown where we'd lived for 5 years, where Allie had never visited because she didn't know it existed. We rode the elevator to the 15th floor in silence. Inside our apartment, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, Margaret finally allowed herself to relax. "That was exhausting," she said, dropping onto the couch. "It's just beginning," I replied. "But tonight was good. We confirmed what we suspected. Now we move to the next phase." "Philip?" "First thing tomorrow. We need to know exactly how bad their situation is. We need documentation, numbers, proof. Everything has to be airtight." Margaret looked at me, her eyes searching my face. "Are you sure about this, Rick? Really sure? She's still our daughter." I thought about Allie's false smile, Garrett's patronizing tone, the way they'd looked at me like I was a resource to be exploited. I thought about the years I'd spent building a business, the careful investments, the sacrifices Margaret and I had made. And I thought about what they were planning to do, to steal from me, to manipulate me, to use my age and their relationship as weapons. She stopped being our daughter when she decided I was a mark, I said. I'm sure. Before we continue, we ask you to hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. Philip Reed had been my business partner for 20 years before we both decided retirement sounded better than boardrooms. We'd built 3 companies together, sold 2, and walked away with enough money to live very comfortably for the rest of our lives. He'd kept his law license active, though, just in case. He'd told me over scotch one night. You never know when you'll need to ruin someone legally. We met at a coffee shop on the edge of town, the kind of place where nobody paid attention to 2 men in their 60s having a quiet conversation. It was tucked between a dry cleaner and the insurance office, anonymous and forgettable. Perfect for our purposes. Philip arrived with a leather portfolio and the same sharp eyes I remembered from 100 negotiations. He'd aged well, still trim, still sharp, still radiating the kind of controlled intelligence that made people nervous in depositions. You're sure about this? He asked after I'd laid it out, showing him the photos I'd taken surreptitiously at the Christmas dinner, explaining the fragments of conversation I'd overheard, describing the micro-expressions and tells that had confirmed my suspicions. I'm sure they're planning something. I'm sure they see me as a mark. I pulled out my phone, showed him more photos. A bank notification on Allie's screen that I'd glimpsed when she set her phone down. Payment overdue, $2,947.52. A text visible on Garrett's tablet when he'd left it on the counter. Need to discuss the Hollister situation ASAP. Harrison is pressing. Philip studied them, his lawyer's mind already working, cataloging what could be used and what couldn't. These photos were taken where? In their home, while I was a guest. Consent to be on the premises. No expectation of privacy for items left in plain view in common areas. He nodded. That's clean. What else? I told him about the phone call, the fragments I'd heard. Philip made notes in neat, precise handwriting. He asked questions. What time, exactly, what words, who else was present? Could anyone corroborate what I'd heard? We need to be careful, he said after I'd finished. Everything has to be legal, documented, verifiable. No hacking, no entrapment, nothing that puts you or me in jeopardy. The moment we cross a line, even a small one, everything we build becomes inadmissible and potentially criminal. I know. I'm serious, Rick. If we do this, we do it clean. Public records, voluntary testimony, legitimate business channels. I'll file information requests, pull corporate records, check property filings. We'll canvass witnesses who've had dealings with Garrett's businesses. We'll document every interaction you have with them from this point forward. But we don't break the law, not even a little bit. Then, we don't break the law, I said. But Philip, I need to know. How bad is their situation? What are we really dealing with here? He closed the portfolio. Give me a week. I'll start with the basics. Corporate filings, property records, UCC liens, court dockets. Anything that's public record. I'll also make some discreet inquiries with people I know in the business community. See what the word is on Garrett Bennett. And if they make a move on me before then, document everything. Save every email, every text, every voicemail. If they ask you to meet, tell me first so I can prep you. If they ask for money, stall. Tell them you need to think about it, that you need to review your accounts, that you want to talk to your financial advisor. He smiled slightly. Which, as of now, is me. We shook hands. His grip was firm, confident. Rick, one more thing. Once we start this, it's going to get ugly. Families fracture. Relationships end. People go to jail sometimes. You need to be prepared for all of that. I'm prepared. Are you prepared for Allie to hate you? Because she will. I thought about it. Really thought about it. About the little girl who'd sat on my lap and asked me to read her stories. About the teenager who'd rolled her eyes at my jokes but laughed anyway. About the woman who'd called me the day before her wedding, crying, asking if she was making the right choice. I'd told her Garrett seemed like a good man. I'd been wrong. The Allie I knew is already gone, I said. The woman in that house last night, the one calculating what she can take from me. I don't know her. And I won't let her destroy me because of who she used to be. Philip nodded slowly. All right then. Let's burn them down. Over the next 5 days, I maintained the role. I called Allie twice, letting her hear the loneliness in my voice, mentioning how quiet the apartment was, how I sometimes forgot to eat dinner because there was no one to eat with. I was laying groundwork, making myself seem vulnerable and isolated, making myself seem like a target worth pursuing. She responded exactly as I expected. She invited me to lunch, just the two of us, daughter and father. Her voice on the phone was warm, concerned. She suggested a restaurant near her house, somewhere casual, somewhere she'd feel comfortable and in control. I agreed, of course. We met on a Wednesday afternoon. The restaurant was one of those trendy places with reclaimed wood and Edison bulbs, the kind of spot where salads cost $18 and came with ingredients you'd never heard of. Allie was already seated when I arrived, at a table near the window where everyone could see her being a good daughter, taking time from her busy day to have lunch with her elderly father. She stood to hug me, and this time the embrace lasted a full 5 seconds. Progress. I shuffled into my seat, fumbling with my coat, playing up the elderly confusion. Thanks for meeting me, Dad. I feel like we haven't had enough one-on-one time lately. I'm always happy to see you, sweetheart. The endearment came easily. I'd practiced it. The right amount of warmth, the slight quaver suggesting emotion. We ordered. She asked about my health, about the apartment, about whether I was sleeping well. Surface questions, the kind you ask while easing into something deeper. I answered with the usual details, mentioning my hypertension medication, the kind woman at the pharmacy who always asked about my week, the way my neighbor's dog barked at night. Then, carefully, I turned the conversation. How are you and Garrett doing? He seems stressed at Christmas. Oh, you know how it is. End-of-year stuff. He's managing a lot of projects. She waved her hand dismissively, but I saw the tightness around her eyes. Must be hard, all that pressure. I remember when I was working. The stress of it. Business can be brutal. He handles it well. He's very good at what he does. I'm sure he is. I paused, looked down at my water glass. You know, when your mother and I were younger, we had some lean years. Times when money was tight. We got through it, but it wasn't easy. She leaned forward slightly. Are you having money problems, Dad? Perfect. She'd taken the bait, but from the wrong direction. Now I had to redirect. Oh, no, I'm fine. The pension is steady, and I've got my savings. I'm careful with money. I smiled self-deprecatingly. Maybe too careful. Your mother always said I should enjoy it more, not just let it sit in the bank. But old habits, you know. How much do you have saved, if you don't mind me asking? There it was, the question I'd been waiting for. I let my face show uncertainty, like I wasn't sure if I should answer, like this was private information I was reluctant to share. Oh, I don't know exactly. A couple $100,000, I think, between the savings account and the CDs. I'd have to check the statements. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. 200,000. Enough to be worth pursuing. Not so much that it seemed unbelievable for a retired businessman who'd lived modestly. That's great, Dad. Really great. You should be proud. I suppose. Though sometimes I wonder if I should be doing something more with it. The interest rates are so low now. It just sits there, not really growing. You know, Garrett knows a lot about investments. Maybe you could talk to him. He helps people all the time with portfolio management. You think he'd have time for that? I wouldn't want to impose. Of course he would. Your family. I'll have him call you. We finished lunch. She insisted on paying, a gesture that might have seemed generous if I didn't know she was already calculating returns. She hugged me goodbye in the parking lot, and this time there was real warmth in it. Not affection, anticipation. That evening, Garrett called. Philip's report arrived the same day Garrett called, and I spent an hour reviewing it before I returned Garrett's call. The picture Philip painted was damning. Garrett's primary business, an investment fund called Bennett Capital Ventures, was a shell. It had minimal assets, no clear revenue stream, and a pattern of moving money between accounts that suggested either incompetence or fraud, probably both. His successful investor image was built on three things: a lucky early investment in a tech startup that had paid out well 5 years ago, which he'd been living off ever since, a series of small, questionable loans from private lenders with names like Harrison Capital and Prestige Funding Partners, and an increasingly elaborate social media presence that presented a lifestyle he couldn't actually afford. The house was mortgaged twice. The first mortgage was with a legitimate bank, currently 2 months in arrears. The second was with a hard money lender, due in full in 60 days. The cars were leased. The furniture was rented. Even the art on the walls was on loan from galleries, part of some kind of showcase program for collectors. There were UCC filings indicating secured interests in Garrett's business assets from at least 4 different lenders. Court records showed 3 small claims judgments against his various LLCs, all unpaid. And most interesting, there were 2 defaults on corporate filings, which meant 2 of his business entities were technically dissolved under state law. He's functionally bankrupt, Philip had written in his summary. The only thing keeping him afloat is appearance. If people knew the real situation, every lender would call their notes, every creditor would file, and he'd be in involuntary bankruptcy within a month. I read the report twice, memorizing details, understanding the full scope of what Garrett and Allie were facing. Then I called him back. "Rick, thanks for getting back to me." His voice was enthusiastic, friendly, the voice of a man who thought he was about to close a deal. "Allie mentioned you might have some time to talk about investments." "Absolutely. I'd be happy to help. Why don't we meet for coffee? Tomorrow work for you?" We set it up for the next morning. I spent the evening preparing with Philip, running through scenarios, anticipating what Garrett would propose. "He'll pitch you on his fund," Philip predicted. "He'll make it sound exclusive, time-sensitive. He'll offer returns that are too good to be true because they are too good to be true. The question is whether he's delusional enough to believe his own pitch or cynical enough to know he's running a con. Does it matter? For legal purposes? Yes. Fraud requires intent. If he genuinely believes his own nonsense, that's different than if he knows he's lying. How do we prove intent? We get him to say it. You'll be recording the conversation? I hesitated. Is that legal? In this state, yes. It's a one-party consent state. As long as you're part of the conversation, you can record it. But Rick, once you start recording, you have to be careful. Don't lead him. Don't put words in his mouth. Let him talk himself into a corner. Philip handed me a small device, barely bigger than a thumb drive. This goes in your shirt pocket. It'll pick up everything within 15 feet. 6-hour battery life. The audio file saves automatically to an encrypted cloud storage that I control. Even if someone takes the device, the recording is safe. I turned it over in my hand. This feels real now. It was always real. This just makes it official. The coffee shop was the same one where Garrett had suggested we meet for dinner on Christmas. Neutral ground, public but not too public. He was already there when I arrived, laptop open, ready to dazzle me. I activated the recording device as I walked in. A small LED blinked green once, then went dark. It was working. "Rick, good to see you." Garrett stood to shake my hand. His grip was firm, confident. The grip of a man who thought he was in control. We ordered coffee. I got plain drip. He got something complicated with foam. We settled into our chairs and he turned the laptop toward me. "I've been thinking about your situation," he began, "and I really believe I can help you. This is a private equity opportunity I'm personally overseeing. It's a small, carefully selected group of investors, very exclusive." The screen showed a presentation with colorful graphs and impressive-looking numbers. Revenue projections that climbed exponentially, return percentages in the high 20s, risk assessments showing minimal downside. "What exactly does the fund invest in?" I asked, playing the interested but confused senior. "We focus on emerging technology companies. Startups that are pre-IPO but showing strong growth indicators. We get in early, provide growth capital, and exit within 18 to 36 months at a significant premium." Sounds complicated. It's actually quite simple. You give me your money, I invest it intelligently, and you make more money, much more. I'm seeing returns of 25 to 30% annually. 25 to 30%. Any legitimate financial advisor would tell you that returns like that consistently are impossible without extreme risk. But Garrett said it with a straight face, like it was normal. "How much would I need to invest?" "Well, normally the minimum is $50,000. But for family, I can get you in for less. Even $20,000 or $30,000 would work." I nodded slowly, like I was considering it. "I'd need to liquidate some CDs. That takes time." "How much time?" There was an edge to his voice now, urgency creeping in. "Maybe 2 weeks. The bank has to process the paperwork." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I could probably hold a spot for you until then. But Rick, I need to be honest. This opportunity is closing at the end of the month. We're at our capital cap. After that, I can't guarantee I can get you in." End of the month. Exactly when his hard money loan was due, according to Philip's report. Why the rush? "It's not a rush, it's just the structure of the fund. We only take on new investors during specific windows. It's part of how we maintain quality control and ensure returns." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. "Rick, between you and me, I shouldn't even be making this exception. But you're family, and I hate seeing money just sitting in a savings account earning nothing when it could be working for you." "That's very generous," I said, letting gratitude color my voice. "You're a good son-in-law, Garrett, looking out for me like this." "Of course, we're family. That's what families do." We talked for another 20 minutes. He showed me more slides, more projections. He name-dropped tech companies I'd heard of, implying connections he probably didn't have. He painted a picture of wealth and security, of a retirement where money wasn't a worry, and all the while the device in my pocket recorded every word. When I left, I called Philip from my car. "Got it," I said. "Every word." "How bad was it?" "Textbook fraud, impossible returns, pressure to invest quickly, claims of exclusivity. He didn't quite admit he's desperate, but it's implied in every word." "Good. But we need more. We need to prove he knows the fund is worthless. We need to show intent." "How?" "We apply pressure, and we watch what happens." That night, Philip filed papers registering an anonymous LLC as a minority investor in Tom Bradshaw's supply company. The purchase cost me $15,000, a tiny fraction of my actual wealth, and gave me legitimate standing as a shareholder. It also gave me access to company records, including accounts receivable, including a detailed list of which clients were current on their payments and which weren't. Garrett Bennett's name appeared 3 times in the delinquent column. Total amount owed, $38,412. Oldest invoice, 123 days overdue. "Now we wait," Philip said. "Bradshaw's company will notify all shareholders of significant delinquencies at the next quarterly meeting. That's in 2 weeks. When that happens, Garrett will know you have access to information he doesn't want you to have. And then? Then he'll panic, and panicked people make mistakes." The next week was a study in controlled pressure. I didn't call Garrett back immediately about the investment, letting him wonder. When he texted me, Hey Rick, just following up on our conversation. Have you thought about timing for liquidating those CDs? I responded slowly, with messages that suggested technical difficulty and elderly confusion. Hi Garrett, I spoke to the bank. They said something about penalties for early withdrawal. I'm trying to understand the numbers. We'll call you soon. 24 hours later. Garrett, the bank manager wants to set up a meeting. They have questions about where the money is going. Is that normal? 48 hours after that. I might have some money available sooner from a different account. Let me check with my financial advisor. Each message was calculated to suggest I had more money than I'd initially indicated, but also more oversight. The bank manager, the financial advisor, people who would ask questions. Philip monitored Garrett's social media, his public appearances, any trace of his movements. He's getting nervous, Philip reported. He posted something vague about exciting new opportunities and expansion plans, but his engagement numbers are down. People are losing interest. Meanwhile, I cultivated other connections. I attended a small business networking event where I knew Garrett would be. I made a point of talking to people about their businesses, asking informed questions, demonstrating knowledge I shouldn't have if I were just a simple retiree with a pension. A woman who ran a marketing consultancy mentioned she'd worked with Garrett briefly. How did that go? I asked casually. She glanced around, lowered her voice. Between you and me? Payment was an issue. We eventually had to threaten legal action to get our invoice settled, and even then, he was 2 months late. That's unfortunate. It is what it is, but I wouldn't work with him again. I thanked her and made a note to tell Philip. Another witness, another data point. The quarterly meeting for Bradshaw's supply company took place on a Tuesday afternoon in a rented conference room at a local business center. There were 8 shareholders present, including me and Tom Bradshaw. The meeting was routine: financial reports, discussion of upcoming projects, review of accounts receivable. When Bradshaw got to the delinquent accounts section, he read through the list methodically. 3 names, 3 amounts, 3 timelines. When he got to Garrett Bennett's accounts, I saw 2 other shareholders exchange glances. Mr. Bradshaw, one of them asked, isn't that the 4th quarter in a row where Bennett's accounts have been flagged? Yes, Bradshaw admitted. We've been in communication with him, and he's promised payment by the end of this month. And if he doesn't pay? Then we'll have to pursue legal remedies. We can't continue to extend credit indefinitely. After the meeting, I approached Bradshaw privately. The man you mentioned, Bennett. I know him. He's my son-in-law. Bradshaw's face showed surprise, then concern. Mr. Hollister, I hope that doesn't create an awkward situation. This is just business. I understand, and I need to ask you something. If this comes to legal action, would you be willing to testify about the payment history? In court, if necessary. He studied me for a long moment. What's this really about? It's about protecting myself and my family from someone who's not what he appears to be. Bradshaw nodded slowly. Yes. If it comes to that, I'll testify. I've got documentation going back 2 years. Promises, delays, excuses, all documented. Thank you. That evening, I received a call from Garrett. His voice was tight, controlled. Rick, we need to talk. Can you come by the house tomorrow? Is everything all right? It's fine. There are some things I need to explain, some business matters. It would be better to discuss in person. Of course. What time? We set it up for 6 o'clock. After I hung up, I called Philip. He knows, I said. About Bradshaw's company? Has to be. The timing's too perfect. The quarterly meeting was today. By tonight, word spreads through the business community. He knows I'm a shareholder, which means he knows I have access to his payment history. Do you want me there? No. This needs to be one-on-one, but I'll be recording everything. Be careful, Rick. If he's truly desperate, there's no telling what he might do. I arrived at Garrett and Allie's house at 6 sharp. This time, the performance was different. No shabby coat, no shuffling walk. I wore slacks and a decent shirt. I stood straighter. I let them see hints of the real me. Garrett answered the door. His smile was strained. "Rick, thanks for coming. Allie's out. Charity thing. It's just us." We sat in his study, a room I hadn't been in before. It was decorated to impress. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, walls lined with business books he'd probably never read. The set dressing of success. "I understand you've invested in Bradshaw's supply company," he said without preamble. "That's right. Seemed like a solid opportunity." "And you were at the quarterly meeting today." "I was. I like to be informed about my investments." He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. It was a power pose, calculated to intimidate. It didn't work. "Rick, I'm going to be straight with you. There's been a misunderstanding with Bradshaw's company, a billing dispute. It's being resolved, but these things take time." "A billing dispute that's 4 months old? These situations are complicated." "Are they? Or are you just not paying your bills?" His face hardened. "I don't appreciate the accusation. I don't appreciate the lies." I kept my voice level, calm. "I'm not a fool, Garrett. I've been in business for 40 years. I know what financial distress looks like. I know what desperation smells like. And I'm looking at both right now." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? Let's see. Your fund is a shell. Your house is mortgaged twice over. You've got liens and defaults and unpaid vendors all over town. You're not an investor. You're a con artist running out of time." He stood abruptly. "Get out." "Not yet." I stood too, facing him. "You were going to steal from me, you and Allie. You saw me as an easy mark, the elderly father with some savings, trusting and confused. You were going to take my money, put it in your fake fund, and when it disappeared, you'd blame the market or bad luck or whatever lie you'd prepared. That's not. But here's what you didn't know. I'm not poor, I'm not confused, and I'm not vulnerable." I pulled out my phone, opened a banking app, showed him a balance sheet. 7 figures, multiple accounts. A portfolio that would make most financial advisors jealous. "This is what I'm actually worth, and you were never going to get a penny of it." His face went white, then red. "You've been lying to us. No more than you've been lying to everyone. The difference is, my lies were about protecting myself. Yours were about stealing from people. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to know what's coming. I want you to understand that you picked the wrong target. And I want you to have time to think about what you're going to tell my daughter when her entire life collapses." I walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and Garrett? That investment opportunity you pitched me? I'm going to make sure everyone who needs to know hears about it. The returns you promised, the timeline, all of it. Let's see how that plays with the Securities Commission." I left him standing there, and I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The fallout from my confrontation with Garrett came faster than I expected. Allie called me the next morning, her voice shaking with rage. "How dare you? How dare you go into our home and attack Garrett like that?" "I didn't attack him. I told him the truth. You accused him of being a criminal. You showed him bank statements like you were trying to prove something. What the hell is wrong with you?" "What's wrong with me?" "Allie, he was trying to steal from me. He pitched me on a fraudulent investment fund. He lied about returns, pressured me to invest quickly, and all of it was designed to take my money." "That's not what happened. He was trying to help you. He was trying to give you advice because he cares about you." "He cares about my bank account. There's a difference." She was crying now, angry tears that made her words come out choked. "You've always hated him. From the beginning. You never thought he was good enough for me. I thought he was fine until I realized he was a fraud. There's documentation, Allie, public records, court filings, payment defaults. Your husband is bankrupt, and he's been using you, and your connection to me, to maintain an illusion." "You're lying." "I'm not. And deep down, you know I'm not. You've seen the signs, the stress, the late-night phone calls, the mounting pressure. You felt it. You just haven't wanted to admit it. There was a long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, harder. Stay away from us. Don't call, don't visit, don't contact us at all. As far as I'm concerned, you're not my father anymore. She hung up. I stood there holding the phone, feeling the weight of what had just happened. Philip's warning echoed in my head. You need to be prepared for Allie to hate you. I was prepared, but it still hurt. Margaret found me in the kitchen an hour later, staring at nothing. She didn't ask what was wrong. She already knew. She just put her arms around me and held on. We can still stop this, she said quietly. If you want to stop, we can walk away. And let them win? Let them steal from someone else? Let them continue the con? No, but I need to know you're sure, because it gets harder from here. I thought about Allie's voice, the fury and the tears. I thought about the little girl she'd been and the woman she'd become. And I thought about all the people Garrett had already hurt, all the vendors unpaid, all the trust betrayed. I'm sure, I said. Over the next 2 weeks, Philip worked methodically. He filed complaints with the Better Business Bureau detailing Garrett's business practices. He sent inquiries to the State Securities Commission, asking about the registration status of Bennett Capital Ventures. He contacted the licensing board that oversaw financial advisors. Every inquiry was legitimate, documented, completely legal. And every inquiry created a paper trail that would be public record. He also reached out to other victims. The marketing consultant I'd met at the networking event agreed to provide a statement. Tom Bradshaw at the supply company compiled his documentation. A web designer Garrett had stiffed came forward. A caterer who'd provided services for one of Garrett's investor events and never been paid. One by one, the pieces fell into place. But we needed more. We needed public exposure, needed to strip away the social camouflage that protected Garrett and Allie. That's when we learned about the charity gala, the Metropolitan Arts Foundation's annual fundraiser, April 15th. Garrett and Allie were listed as Silver Circle donors and had been asked to give brief remarks during the program about the importance of supporting the arts. It was perfect. A public stage, a respected audience, a moment when their credibility would be at its peak. And that's when we would strike. This is it, Philip said as we reviewed the event details in his office. This is where we end it. But Rick, once we do this, there's no going back. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be public. And it's going to destroy them. They destroyed themselves, I said. We're just making sure everyone knows it. We bought a table. Philip arranged for specific guests. Tom Bradshaw, the marketing consultant, 2 other vendors Garrett had stiffed, a reporter from the Business Journal, and a retired judge who Philip had known for years. 8 seats, each occupied by someone who had reason to see Garrett exposed. We prepared documentation. Philip compiled everything into a single presentation. Side-by-side comparisons of Garrett's claims and the reality, payment histories, loan defaults, corporate dissolutions. Everything was sourced, everything was verifiable, everything was true. And then we waited. The night of the gala arrived with a soft spring rain, the kind that makes everything clean and new. I dressed carefully, suit and tie, looking every inch the successful businessman I'd always been. Margaret wore a blue dress that brought out her eyes. We looked like we belonged at this event. We arrived early, watched people filter in. The ballroom was elegant, all chandeliers and white tablecloths, the kind of setting that makes people feel important. I saw Garrett and Allie near the entrance, greeting guests. They wore their success like armor, smiling and laughing, playing their parts perfectly. They didn't see us come in. We moved through the crowd, found our table near the back. Our guests arrived one by one. Tom Bradshaw with his wife, looking nervous. The marketing consultant, whose name was Helen, looking determined. The web designer, a young man named Kevin, who'd almost lost his business when Garrett didn't pay. The caterer, Maria, who'd had to take out a loan to cover supplies, the reporter, whose byline I'd seen in dozens of business articles, the retired judge, Judge Anderson, who'd agreed to attend as a neutral witness to whatever happened. Philip sat beside me, a tablet computer in front of him, our entire presentation loaded and ready. The program began. Speeches about the importance of the arts, about community support, about the transformative power of culture. I barely heard them. I was watching Garrett and Allie at the head table, watching them bask in the recognition they hadn't earned. Then came the donor recognition. Names were read, people applauded, photographs were taken. When they reached the silver circle level, Garrett and Allie were invited to the stage. Garrett took the microphone. "Thank you all for being here tonight. My wife and I are honored to support the Metropolitan Arts Foundation. The arts represent the best of our community: creativity, innovation, and the courage to imagine better futures." The irony was almost too much. He was talking about courage and imagination while his entire life was a fiction. He continued, his voice warm and practiced. "We believe in investing in our community, not just financially, but with our time, our energy, our commitment. The arts aren't just entertainment, they're education, inspiration, and transformation. And that's why Allie and I are proud to announce an additional gift of $25,000 to establish a scholarship fund for young artists." The room erupted in applause. $25,000 he didn't have, a commitment he couldn't fulfill, announced publicly to cement his image as a generous philanthropist. That's when Philip touched his tablet. The large screen behind Garrett, which had been showing the foundation's logo, flickered. Then it changed. The first slide was simple. A photograph of Garrett from his social media, standing beside a luxury car, with text below, "Garrett Bennett, successful investor." The second slide appeared beside it, a corporate filing showing Bennett Capital Ventures with 0 assets and multiple outstanding debts. The third slide, a screenshot of Garrett's website promising consistent returns of 25 to 30% annually. The fourth slide, a Securities Commission notice stating that Bennett Capital Ventures was not a registered investment advisor. The room went quiet. People turned to look at the screen, confusion spreading across faces. Garrett turned around, saw the presentation, and froze. "What?" he started. A fifth slide appeared. A list of unpaid vendors, amounts, dates. Tom Bradshaw's company was at the top. Philip stood. His voice carried across the ballroom, calm and authoritative. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. My name is Philip Reed. I'm an attorney, and I represent several individuals who have been defrauded by Garrett Bennett. Everything you see on this screen is from public records, verified and documented. Mr. Bennett has been representing himself as a successful investor while defaulting on loans, failing to pay vendors, and soliciting investments in an unregistered fund promising impossible returns." Allie grabbed the microphone. "This is insane. Someone turn that off. This is the truth," I said, standing. My voice wasn't as loud as Philip's, but it carried. "And I can verify it, because I'm one of the people Garrett tried to defraud. I'm Rick Hollister. I'm Allie's father. And 3 weeks ago, Garrett pitched me on his investment fund, promising returns he couldn't possibly deliver, pressuring me to invest quickly, all while knowing his business was collapsing." The murmurs in the room grew louder. I saw board members pulling out phones, looking up the information on the screen. I saw donors exchanging concerned glances. Garrett came down from the stage, moving toward me. You set this up. You planned this." "I documented it. There's a difference. Everything on that screen is out of context. It's misleading. Tom Bradshaw stood. "It's not misleading. You owe my company almost $40,000. You've owed it for 5 months. You've made promises and excuses and lies, but you haven't made payment." Helen stood next. "You owe me $9,000 for services rendered. You stopped returning my calls when the bill came due." Kevin, the web designer, $6,500. You told me the check was in the mail for 3 months. Maria, the caterer, $3,200. I had to borrow money to cover the cost of the event you hired me for. One by one, they stood. One by one, they named their grievances. And one by one, the room's opinion shifted. Garrett's face went from red to pale. This is a setup. This is coordinated. You've all been put up to this. No one's been put up to anything, Judge Anderson said, standing. His voice carried the weight of decades on the bench. I've reviewed the documentation Mr. Reed prepared. It's all from public sources. Corporate filings, court records, UCC liens. It's all verifiable, and it paints a picture of systemic fraud. Allie was crying now, mascara running down her face. Dad, how could you do this? How could I? I felt my voice rising, felt the anger I'd been holding break through. You and your husband tried to steal from me. You saw me as a mark, as money to be extracted. You played on my age, my relationship with you, everything that should have been sacred, and you did it without hesitation. That's not true. Yes, it is. I pulled out my phone, opened a recording app. I have audio of Garrett pitching his fake investment fund. I have his promises, his pressure tactics, his lies, all recorded with his knowledge that I was in the room, all legal, all admissible. Garrett lunged at me then. He came fast, hands reaching for my throat. I'd been expecting it. I'd practiced this with a self-defense instructor for weeks. I sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, used his momentum to send him stumbling past me. Security was already moving, two large men in dark suits converging on Garrett. But he recovered faster than I expected, came at me again. This time Philip intercepted, stepping between us, one hand firmly on Garrett's chest. That's assault, Philip said calmly. In front of 400 witnesses and multiple cameras, I strongly suggest you stop. Garrett was breathing hard, his face twisted with rage and desperation. You've destroyed us. You've destroyed everything. No, I said quietly. You destroyed yourselves. I just made sure people knew about it. The security guards took Garrett by each arm. He didn't resist, all the fight suddenly gone out of him. Allie followed, still crying, still protesting. As they reached the exit, she turned back one more time. I'll never forgive you for this, she said. I know, I replied. The aftermath came fast. By the next morning, the story was on the front page of the local business journal's website. By afternoon, it had been picked up by regional outlets. By evening, it was trending on local social media. The headline read, Local businessman exposed for fraud at charity gala. Father among victims. The article was detailed and damning. The reporter who'd attended our table had done his homework, cross-referencing everything we'd presented, interviewing other victims who'd come forward after the gala. The story painted a picture of systematic deception spanning years. But more than that, it captured the emotional core of the story. A father driven to expose his own son-in-law to protect not just himself, but an entire community from a predator. Philip called me that morning. The Securities Commission wants to talk. So does the Attorney General's office. And Rick, you need to prepare yourself. There's going to be criminal charges. Wire fraud, probably. Maybe securities fraud. Possibly theft by deception. How long? For an indictment? Weeks, maybe. For a trial? Could be a year or more. These things move slowly. I thought about that. A year of this hanging over all of us. A year of Allie hating me. A year of wondering if I'd done the right thing. I did the right thing, I said aloud. Yes, Philip agreed. You did. The calls started coming in. Other victims who'd seen the news, who had their own stories about Garrett. A retired couple who'd invested their savings in his fund and lost everything. A young entrepreneur who'd partnered with him on a startup and ended up in debt. A nonprofit that had trusted him with fundraising and found their donations had been diverted. Philip cataloged each one, took statements, gathered documentation. The case against Garrett grew larger every day. Margaret and I stayed in our condo, avoiding the public attention. But I followed the story obsessively, reading every article, every comment, every update. On the third day, Garrett issued a statement through his lawyer. It claimed misunderstanding, denied wrongdoing, promised to vigorously defend against these baseless accusations. It was exactly what I expected. The last gasp of a con artist trying to maintain the fiction. On the fifth day, Allie posted something on social media, a long, emotional message about betrayal, family loyalty, and rush to judgment. She painted me as vindictive, herself and Garrett as victims of a vendetta. Some people believed her, most didn't. On the seventh day, I received a letter. It was hand-delivered to the front desk of our building, in an envelope with my name written in Allie's handwriting. I opened it alone in my study, Margaret giving me privacy. The letter was short. Dad, I don't know if I'll ever understand why you did this. You could have talked to us privately. You could have helped us instead of destroying us. You chose public humiliation instead of family. Garrett made mistakes. I'm not blind to that now. But they were mistakes, not crimes. He was trying to keep things together, trying to make things work. And when he failed, you made sure the failure was as painful and public as possible. You've won. I hope it was worth it. I hope the satisfaction of being right matters more than having a daughter. I won't contact you again. Please don't contact me. Allie. I read it 3 times, then I folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. Margaret came in a few minutes later. Are you okay? No, I said honestly, but I will be. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings. Philip coordinated with the Attorney General's office, providing our documentation, our recordings, our witness statements. I gave a deposition that lasted 6 hours, walking prosecutors through every interaction I'd had with Garrett, every lie he'd told, every manipulation he'd attempted. The prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 40s named Jennifer Walsh, was impressed by our thoroughness. Mr. Hollister, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen a victim prepare a case this well. You handed us a conviction on a silver platter. I wanted to make sure there were no loopholes, I said. No technicalities he could exploit. There aren't. The recordings alone are damning. Add in the witness testimony, the financial records, the pattern of behavior, we have him cold. The indictment came down 3 weeks after the gala. 7 counts. Wire fraud, securities fraud, theft by deception, operating an unregistered investment fund, and 3 counts of making false statements to induce investments. Garrett's bail was set at $500,000. He couldn't make it. He spent 2 weeks in county jail before his lawyer managed to arrange a bond. The house went into foreclosure. The cars were repossessed. The life they'd built collapsed in slow motion. Allie moved back in with her mother, not mine. Margaret's sister, who lived 2 states away. She took their son, my grandson, a boy I barely knew because Allie had kept him distant from us in recent years. I received 1 brief email from her. I'm staying with Aunt Linda until this is resolved. Please don't try to contact me. I honored her request. It hurt, but I honored it. Meanwhile, the civil cases began. Tom Bradshaw sued for payment. Helen, the marketing consultant, filed. Kevin, the web designer. Maria, the caterer. The couple who'd lost their savings filed a class action lawsuit. The nonprofit filed. One by one, the victims lined up to get their piece of whatever assets Garrett had left. There weren't many assets left. Philip kept me informed of each development. The bankruptcy filing came through today. Garrett's listing debts of over $2 million, assets of maybe $300,000, most of that tied up in the house, which is already in foreclosure. What about Allie? She's not named in the criminal charges. The prosecution doesn't think she knew the full extent of the fraud, but she's named in some of the civil cases. People think she benefited from the stolen money, which she did. Will she lose everything? Probably. The bankruptcy will likely extend to marital assets. She might be able to keep some personal items, but the lifestyle is gone. I should have felt satisfaction at that. I should have felt like justice was being served. Instead, I just felt tired. Margaret found me in the study late one night, staring at a photo of Allie from her college graduation. She looked so young in it, so full of hope and potential. "You did the right thing," Margaret said quietly. "Then why does it feel so wrong?" "Because she's still our daughter. And because even when someone deserves consequences, watching them suffer is hard." She sat beside me. "But Rick, think about what would have happened if you'd done nothing. He would have stolen from you. Then he would have moved on to someone else, and someone else, and someone else. You stopped that. You protected people." "I destroyed our daughter's life." "No. Her husband destroyed her life. You just made sure the destruction didn't spread." The trial was set for October, 6 months after the indictment. Philip warned me it would be difficult. "Garrett's lawyer is going to go after you hard. They'll paint you as vindictive, controlling, as someone who couldn't handle his daughter's independence. They'll make this about family dysfunction, not fraud. Let them try. Rick, I need you to prepare for what they're going to say. They're going to claim you set Garrett up, that you created the situation to trap him. They're going to say the recording was entrapment, that you manipulated him into making those statements. Is any of that true? No, but they'll argue it anyway." In August, 2 months before trial, Garrett's lawyer reached out about a plea deal. Philip called me with the news. "They're offering to plead guilty to 3 counts. 1 wire fraud, 1 theft by deception, 1 false statements. In exchange, the prosecution drops the securities fraud charges and recommends a sentence of 3 to 5 years. And the money? He'd have to make restitution, pay back everyone he stole from. The court would set up a payment plan, garnish any future wages. It would take decades, but legally he'd be obligated. What do the victims want? Most of them want to be done with it. A trial is expensive, exhausting, and there's always the chance a jury doesn't convict. This way, they get a guarantee." "And what do you think?" Philip was quiet for a moment. "I think he deserves a trial. I think he deserves to have every lie exposed in open court, to have 12 citizens judge him and find him guilty on all counts. But I also think about the toll it takes on you, on Margaret, on everyone involved. Trials are brutal." "Set up a meeting," I said. "I want to hear the deal directly." The meeting took place in a conference room at Philip's office. Garrett's lawyer was there, a slick man named Morrison, who'd made his reputation defending white-collar criminals. Garrett was there too, looking smaller than I remembered, wearing an ill-fitting suit and the hunted expression of someone who knew he'd lost. Morrison laid out the deal. 3 counts, 3 to 5 years, restitution. Garrett would serve his time, pay his debts, and when he was released, he'd have a chance to rebuild. "What about Allie?" I asked. "Mrs. Bennett is not part of this agreement," Morrison said. "She was not charged criminally, and the civil cases against her are separate matters." "But this would end the criminal proceedings. She could start to move on." Morrison nodded. "That's correct." I looked at Garrett. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Tell me something," I said. "Were you ever going to pay back the people you stole from? Or was the plan to just keep moving, keep finding new marks, keep running the con?" Garrett's jaw tightened. "I was trying to make it work. I genuinely believed I could turn things around. If I'd had a little more time—" "You didn't need more time. You needed to stop lying. You needed to face reality instead of building bigger and bigger fictions. Easy for you to say. You've got millions. You've never been desperate. I earned my money honestly. I built businesses, created value, treated people fairly. You just took." Morrison held up a hand. "Gentlemen, this isn't productive. Mr. Hollister, the question is whether you'll accept this plea arrangement. It provides certainty, closure, and justice. What do you say?" I thought about it, about a trial, about months of testimony and cross-examination and media attention, about Allie sitting in a courtroom watching her husband be dissected, about my grandson learning about all of this someday. "I'll accept it," I said. On one condition. What's that? Garrett has to admit what he did. Publicly. A full confession, not just a guilty plea in court. I want him to acknowledge every person he hurt, every lie he told. I want him to own it. Morrison shook his head. That's not... Then there's no deal, I said. We go to trial. And I promise you, by the time I'm done testifying, everyone will know exactly what kind of man Garrett Bennett is. Garrett looked at his lawyer, then back at me. Fine, I'll do it. The confession was made in a courtroom on September 15th, 1 month before the trial was scheduled to begin. The room was packed. Victims, reporters, curious onlookers, everyone who had followed the story and wanted to see the ending. Garrett stood before the judge, his lawyer beside him. He wore a suit that actually fit this time, probably borrowed. His face was pale but composed. The judge, a stern man named Whitmore, who I'd learned had a reputation for harsh sentences, reviewed the plea agreement. Then he looked at Garrett. Mr. Bennett, I understand you wish to make a statement before I accept this plea. Yes, Your Honor. Proceed. Garrett turned to face the courtroom. His eyes swept across the faces. Tom Bradshaw, Helen, Kevin, Maria, all the others. They landed on me for just a moment, then moved on. My name is Garrett Bennett, he began, his voice steady but quiet. And I'm here to admit that I defrauded multiple people and businesses over a period of approximately 3 years. He paused, took a breath. I operated an investment fund that I represented as successful and legitimate. It was neither. I solicited investments promising returns of 25 to 30% annually, which I knew were impossible. I used money from new investors to pay returns to old investors, in a classic Ponzi scheme structure. When that wasn't enough, I simply didn't pay people I owed money to. The courtroom was absolutely silent. I lied to vendors about payment timelines. I lied to partners about the financial health of my businesses. I lied to donors about my charitable contributions. And I attempted to defraud my father-in-law, Rick Hollister, by pressuring him to invest in my fake fund. He turned toward me. Mr. Hollister, I specifically want to acknowledge what I tried to do to you. I saw your age and your relationship to my wife as vulnerabilities I could exploit. I crafted a pitch designed to pressure you into making a quick decision. I planned to take your money and use it to cover my debts, knowing you'd never see returns and probably never see the principal again. It was calculated, it was predatory, and I'm sorry. The apology sounded sincere. Maybe it was. It didn't matter. He turned to the others. To Tom Bradshaw, I owe you $38,412. I made excuse after excuse while your business suffered. I'm sorry. One by one he named them. Helen, Kevin, Maria, the retired couple, the non-profit, the young entrepreneur. One by one, he acknowledged what he'd done to them. When he finished, the courtroom remained silent for a long moment. Judge Whitmore spoke. Mr. Bennett, I accept your guilty plea on counts 1, 3, and 5. The other counts are dismissed per the plea agreement. Sentencing will be set for 4 weeks from today. Until then, you'll remain free on bond. But let me be clear. I've listened to your confession, and while I appreciate the candor, it doesn't change the severity of what you've done. You systematically deceived and stole from people who trusted you. Prepare yourself for significant prison time. Garrett nodded. Yes, Your Honor. The hearing ended. People filed out slowly, processing what they'd heard. I saw Tom Bradshaw talking to his wife, saw relief on his face. I saw Helen wiping tears from her eyes. I saw Maria smiling grimly. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I gave a brief statement, thanked the prosecution and the victims for their courage. I said I hoped this provided closure. What I didn't say was that it didn't feel like closure. It felt like a wound still open, still bleeding. Allie wasn't at the hearing. I hadn't expected her to be. But as Margaret and I walked to our car, I saw her, She was across the street, half hidden behind a tree, watching. Our eyes met for just a moment. Then she turned and walked away. Sentencing day arrived on a cold October morning. The leaves had turned, brilliant reds and golds, and there was a bite to the air that promised winter. I dressed carefully in a dark suit, appropriate for the occasion. The courtroom was less crowded than it had been for the confession. Just the principals, the lawyers, the victims who wanted to see it through, a few reporters, and Allie, sitting alone in the back row. I took a seat near the front with Margaret and Philip. I didn't look back at Allie. I didn't trust myself to. Judge Whitmore entered, and the proceedings began. Garrett's lawyer made his pitch for leniency. First offense, genuine remorse, commitment to making restitution. He painted Garrett as a man who'd made mistakes, but wasn't fundamentally criminal. Then the prosecution spoke. Jennifer Walsh was precise and devastating. She walked through the impact statements from victims, quantified the financial harm, described the betrayal of trust. She recommended 6 years, more than the 3 to 5 in the plea agreement. The judge asked if anyone else wished to speak. I stood. Your Honor, I'd like to say something. I walked to the front of the courtroom. I didn't have notes. I'd been thinking about what to say for weeks. I'm Rick Hollister. I'm the person who exposed his crimes. I paused. I want the court to know that this has been the hardest thing I've ever done. My daughter isn't speaking to me. My grandson doesn't know me. I've lost relationships that mattered. I looked at Garrett. He was watching me now, his face unreadable. But I'd do it again. Because Garrett Bennett is a predator. He's charming and intelligent and persuasive, and he uses those gifts to exploit vulnerable people. He saw my age as vulnerability. He tried to steal from me. If I hadn't caught him, he would have moved on to someone else, and someone else. The only thing that stops a predator is force, legal force, the force of consequences. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, I don't feel sorry for Garrett Bennett. I feel sorry for the people he hurt, but I don't feel sorry for him. He earned every bit of what he's getting. I sat down. The courtroom was quiet. Judge Whitmore looked at Garrett. Mr. Bennett, do you have anything to say before I impose sentence? Garrett stood. Your Honor, I've said what I need to say. I'm guilty. I'm sorry. I accept whatever sentence you impose. The judge nodded. Then he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of authority. Mr. Garrett Bennett, you have pleaded guilty to 3 counts of fraud and theft. These crimes represent a systematic effort to enrich yourself at the expense of others. He paused. I hereby sentence you to 6 years in state prison. You'll be eligible for parole after serving 4 years and 9 months. You're also ordered to pay full restitution to all victims, totaling $1,843,000. Garrett's face went white. 6 years, more than the plea agreement. Additionally, Judge Whitmore continued, upon release, you will be on supervised probation for 5 years. You are prohibited from operating any business without prior approval. You are prohibited from soliciting investments or offering financial advice. He struck his gavel. This court is adjourned. Garrett was led away by marshals. As he passed my row, he looked at me one more time. Just resignation. Just acceptance. But I wasn't done. I stood and walked toward where the marshals were taking Garrett. Philip grabbed my arm. Rick, don't... I shook him off gently. I approached until I was close enough that only Garrett could hear me. 6 years, I said quietly. 6 years to think about what you did. 6 years to understand that there are consequences. I leaned closer. And when you get out, I'll still be here. I'll still be watching. And if you ever try anything like this again, I'll bury you so deep you'll never see daylight. One of the marshals cleared his throat. Sir, please step back. I stepped back, but I kept my eyes locked on Garrett's until they led him away. When I turned around, The courtroom had emptied except for Margaret, Philip, and Allie. She was standing now, tears streaming down her face. "Are you happy now?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Is this what you wanted?" "I wanted him to face consequences for what he did, that's all. You didn't have to destroy him, you didn't have to make it so public. And let him continue scamming people? Let him ruin more lives? What am I supposed to do now?" For the first time, I felt something crack in my resolve. She looked so lost. "You move forward," I said quietly. "You protect your son. You rebuild your life without Garrett's lies. You become the person I always believed you could be." "I hate you," she said. But there was no force behind it. "I know." She turned and walked away. I watched her go, feeling the weight of everything we'd lost. Margaret took my hand. "Rick, are you all right?" "No," I said, "but I will be." We walked out into the cold October air. Philip appeared beside me. "You did it. It's over." "Is it?" I looked at him. "Garrett goes to prison, but Allie still hates me. The family is destroyed. Is that victory?" "Yes," Philip said firmly, "because the alternative was letting him win. You stopped that. You protected people. That matters." I nodded slowly. He was right. Margaret squeezed my hand. "Let's go home." That night, I sat in my study with a glass of scotch. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I know what you did. I know you were right. I'm not ready to forgive you, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my life hating you either. Someday, maybe, we can talk. Not now, but someday. Allie." I read it 3 times. Then I saved the number. Margaret came in. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said. "I think it's going to be." She sat beside me and we watched the city lights through the window. 6 months of planning, 3 months of legal proceedings, and it was finally over. Garrett was in prison. The victims were getting restitution. The truth was known. I had won. The cost had been high, but I had won. I raised my glass in a silent toast, to justice, to truth, to the difficult victories that matter most. Then I drank and let myself feel, for the first time in months, a sense of peace.